Hello everyone, my name is Kristen. I'm a PhD student in the music department at the University of Nottingham in England. My thesis seeks to examine how one city-based music service, that is the Nottingham Music Service, converts the policy text of the National Plan for Music Education into policy action. So the paper itself today explores the realities of how the Nottingham Music Service, or NMS, delivers the government's inclusive vision for music education. I introduce the National Plan for Music Education, or the NPME, which was England's first national policy paper for music. The plan implemented both music education hubs and whole class ensemble teaching, or WCET, as a standard teaching method for these hubs to enact in school time. I introduced Fautley, Kinsella and Whittaker's dueling theorised conceptualisations of WCET philosophy. These are music starting with the instrument, or MSWI, and music via the instrument, or MVI. I then go on to discuss the unique difficulties in providing WCET from an MVI standpoint, such as that of NMS. Whilst inter- and intrapersonal benefits are a resultant positive of ensemble music making in the WCET space, many issues arise from the MVI stance due to the central foregrounding of the instrument. These issues are most obvious in WCET when attempting to differentiate across a group of 30 children. The paper concludes with questions and reflections on current positions and ways forward. So the National Plan for Music Education was inspired by an independent review undertaken by Darren Henley back in 2010. He set out comprehensive lists of recommendations to improve provision nationally, a provision that he deemed good in places, but distinctly patchy. These recommendations were taken up by government upon the release of the plan a year later in late November 2011. The NPME made quite substantial changes to England's music education landscape in two main areas. Firstly, the plan established an organised national system of music education hubs. These were implemented to take forward the work of local authority music services. These organisations differed from ex-local authority music services in that their main aim would be to cohesively restructure England's fragmented and uncoordinated music education system. Hubs, made up of a conglomerate of organisations with vested interests in music ed, would pool their resources to provide the highest quality musical learning for children in their local areas as possible. Hubs would be overseen and led by music services. In the case of NMS, they are the lead for Nottingham Music Hub. The plan's second main area of change came with a national WCET programme, which entitled Every Child aged 5 to 18 the opportunity to learn a musical instrument other than voice. WCET lessons are led by specialist peripatetic music teachers. These lessons either adopt one particular instrument or different instruments of the same family. My own case study schools teach a combination of trumpet, baritone, horn and trombone, and violin, viola and cello. So why WCET? Well, the WCET method was previously trialled under the Wider Opportunities Initiative in the early 2000s, where 13 selected schools across the country took part. Wider Ops aimed to bring specialist music teaching into a generalist environment, whilst linking provision with pupils' curriculum music experiences. Also, WCET is, most importantly, free at point of access. As the literature attests, costs of instrumental learning are long-standing issues. The immediate costs of lesson fees are mitigated if provision is made available in curriculum time through the school. So my own case study music service, NMS, a charity organisation as of 2013, have a long-standing relationship with WCET. Upon the service's establishment in Nottingham City in 2001, available data suggested that 641, that's just under 2%, of Key Stage 1 to 3 children were learning to play an instrument in schools. This was out of a total primary school population of just over 34,000. As of 2019, 82% of pupils in Nottingham City primaries are now learning a musical instrument through NMS's WCET. 55 primary schools engage with the service, NMS holds 5 basic funding models based on time committed to music in the curriculum. Schools can choose from an hour fortnightly or weekly WCET session alongside a 3-tiered in-harmony provision of silver, bronze or gold, with greater levels of engagement with the service the higher the tier. 33 of the 55 schools, that's 60%, engage with one of NMS's in-harmony models of provision. NMS's philosophy is making music make a difference. This means they're committed to making music more accessible and inclusive. They see their work as distinct from other more traditional local authority music services, whose provision focuses on excellence on the instrument through one-to-one or small group tuition, and progressive continuation through high-quality ensembles. Seeking to overcome barriers to access, NMS's philosophy falls within the music via the instrument, or MVI, categorization of WCET pedagogical conceptualizations. They firmly place making a social impact through music at the heart of their provision over playing the right dots in the right places at the right time. So what is this MSWI versus MVI gulf that I've mentioned? Well, contention over the instrument's role in the WCET method is an obvious result of the NPME's insistence upon providing children the opportunity to learn a musical instrument other than voice. Fautley, Kinsella and Whittaker's 2017 WCET research report offers these 2 broad categorizations, as theorised from survey and interview responses, with a representative sample of just over 73% of hubs across England. In the MSWI conceptualisation, proficiency on the instrument leads to more broad music learning. There's the inherent assumption that pupils must acquire some level of technical skill before broader musical concepts warrant introduction into the learning process. MVI, conversely, views the instrument as an object through which musical learning and understanding can develop. From this position, it is a general music education which is important, achieved through the mediating affordances of playing the instrument, but also going beyond it. The research report is substantive in evidencing free text responses befitting each category, a selection of which I've included here. In MSWI, developing understanding in technical aspects of the instrument, such as tone, sound, and intonation, lead to an increased awareness of musical elements like beat, rhythm, pitch, and notation. It was expected by some within this category that children would be performing to graded standards by a certain age. MVI responses viewed their WCET more holistically, with personal and cultural development an equal and common goal alongside increased musical awareness. As stated previously, NMS's work centres on an MVI philosophy. The quote above in relation to the MVI philosophy, all are working towards a common goal, is apt. From my observations and interviews, I found that inclusion was most readily realised when the focus was on the unity of group playing an instrument together in an ensemble setting, and not on the individual or solo player. The inter- and intrapersonal benefits of ensemble music making are widely cited in the literature. A 2019 In Harmony Liverpool report found that participants self-reported a positive impact and development on their inter- and intrapersonal skills over their time with the programme. These skills included resilience, self-esteem, motivation and confidence, and improved ability to collaborate, cooperate and work in teams, and leadership, listening and communication skills. I witnessed some of these sentiments myself in my own observations. Social benefits were the most obviously identifiable positive outcome. Pupils inhabited a spirit of collaboration in their WCET time. They supported one another in assembling a trombone or demonstrating correct posture. They high-fived one another upon playing a rhythm or pitching a note correctly. Group work was particularly illuminating. Each child, when the time came to perform, became members of an ensemble. They didn't stand as solo players judged on technique, but as team players. Encouragement and praise from music teachers focused on the commitment shown to this teamwork. One head teacher I interviewed used the everybody is on the same bus analogy, meaning all shared a commitment and passion for music. This was not only the case among the adults and children separately, but a sharing of music in a learning community. WCET was successful when class teachers immersed themselves within it. The setup of the teaching space fed into this. In one of my schools, pupils, class teachers, and eventually myself were invited into the horseshoe, which is visible here in the left-hand side image. Once I entered, I picked up a brass instrument for the first time in a decade, and I resumed my own musical journey in the company of others. In that space, we were all learners. MVI WCET clearly finds inclusive strengths in its emphasis on the group as a whole and not simply its parts. However, there are inevitable weaknesses with the approach. So, what are these issues? Well, there is very little opportunity to work in a systematic and long-term way with individual children in WCET. This links to the concept of differentiation, neatly defined by Eikeland and Ona as the adoption of diversity in the approach to teaching and learning within a classroom. In the case of WCET, this encompasses negotiating a class of 30 children on instruments with varying degrees of ability and retention levels. An obvious issue presents itself here concerning the place of the instrument and the necessity for music staff to teach both content, musical elements, and technical aspects simultaneously. One CT I interviewed, one class teacher, acknowledged that in WCET some children are in danger of slipping under the radar. Teaching pitch was a pertinent example of this. In WCET, rhythm and pitch were taught as two separate concepts. The class would warm up on call and response rhythms on a static note. I noticed over the year that rhythmic identification noticeably improved, yet pitch was more problematic. Children could identify pitch from music teacher demonstrations when asked, is this note higher or lower? But translating this accurately onto instruments was an issue. The ensemble environment was actually an exacerbating factor here. When 30 children play brass instruments, picking out individual sounds is impractical. WCET's emphasis on ensemble playing means children struggle to hear the sounds they are producing among the tumult of collective noise. Examples of solo playing were rare. Individual children were only really asked to play alone without the benefit of choice a handful of times during the school year. Some children were enthusiastic at the prospect, whilst for others it was an unpleasant experience. This I found was usually down to whether the child felt they were technically able enough to perform with confidence for the group. Ability levels linked to this. They became clearer across classes as the school year progressed. Some children were viewed as excelling. They were technically able, consistently engaged, and well behaved. These pupils were on staff's radar for follow-on routes and exams. Others, however, struggled. They faced difficulties with extended valve and slide positions. They may have produced a sound, but with little confidence. Despite NMS extolling an MVI conceptualisation of WCET, teaching staff often focused on those excelling children, on those who would continue to play. Continuation for staff was a factor in evidence of WCET's efficacy as a teaching model. Daniel, a strings teacher, stated that he felt follow-on routes would be a good indicator of WCET's success, predicated on children's progressive technical abilities on their instruments. Another strings player openly admitted to me that they could easily identify which classes would continue through the NMS ensemble system and which would not. Despite the issues of differentiation just discussed, which come as a result of the MVI approach itself, a further issue affecting teachers' abilities to differentiate comes in the context of teaching, which is largely out of their control. That is, team teaching versus lone teaching. Here I've included a table summarising the differences in provision across my three main case study schools. Across these three schools, the time and resources available to teachers differed hugely. The in-harmony funding models I mentioned earlier essentially buy more time and resources. As you can see in schools A and B, bronze and gold in harmony brought in 2 teachers. Team teaching allowed these teachers, 2 of them, between 15 children in the WCET space, which naturally increased the amount of individualisation able to take place. Lone teachers, as in school C, were denied this. Add to this time considerations. As can be seen, the difference in curriculum time is stark. School C's pupils receive an average of 15 to 16 hours of teaching per school year. School B's pupils receive almost 3 times that. The half-an-hour lessons I observed in School C often felt rushed. Differentiation was missed as the music teacher battled to get through the content of the lesson in such a short amount of time. And what does this all come down to? Well, funding. As you can see, the difference in cost of provision between School A and C is quite small, but the difference with School B in the tens of thousands of pounds is staggering. Remember Henley's points on music education in England being fragmented, uncoordinated and patchy? Well, my work suggests that this is not just nationally or regionally occurring, but across schools a half-hour round trip from one another. One external factor impacting inclusive provision is the funding, that is, schools buying provision in. A customer-provider relationship exists between schools and hubs, whereby NMS must constantly consider the relevancy of their provision. In this case, the attraction is the instrument, giving children an opportunity with something they have never experienced before. Some schools, as with School B and A, are enthusiastic and consistently supportive. Other schools, like School C, have to cut funding and leave teachers struggling. Yet there is also an important internal factor within the profession to consider, as this presentation has from the start and will conclude with. It is clear from my research that there is little coherent vision of what WCET is or what it should be. Spruce stated in reference to the plan, there is a vacuum at the heart of music education discourse in England that has resulted in a failure to define and promote music education's purpose, aims and values. This is both true of broader music education and WCET specifically. As the Fautley, Kinsella and Whittaker's report states, conceptualizations of what WCET actually entails are not subject to widespread agreement. And there is possibly still some work to be done in establishing exactly what the purpose of WCET might be. As a result of this lack of coherent vision, improving the quality and consistency of music education in England, as the NPME initially called for over a decade ago, is a continuing challenge. I've demonstrated in this paper some of the ways in which WCET experiences these challenges. I hope I've provided some points for reflection and debate on the age-old considerations of how a music education should be conceptualised in a school setting, what it should look like, and methods by which to approach it. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering any of your questions in the question and answer session.